Hi, you're welcome to Brotherscode, and my name is Shay Daniels. It's such a joy to have you here. Brotherscode is an initiative that God has laid in my heart to help raise the bar for men by speaking about things that have to do with men, having conversations about things that we don't talk about. And you're welcome to Brotherscode.
Hi, my name is David Johnson. I'm a youth development worker, businessman, sound engineer, father, and I'm an ex pastor's child. My parents were pastors, but we'll go into that.
So going through all of that, being in a gang, essentially one of the occupational hazards is that you'd have some run-ins with the law,
Yeah.
with the Jakes, with the how do my Caribbean people, how do they call it? The boy them.
Why then?
All right.
Yeah.
So how was did you get into any situation where it was really bad? Because sometimes you can just have the back and forth banter that sometimes they know they're up to no good, but they can't really prove anything.
Yeah.
So it's just talk.
Yeah.
But then other times there can be cases, there can be serious consequences.
Yeah.
Was there anything in your story that may have led you to something that was more serious than you possibly anticipated?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny you say that because I never, even though I was part of the gang, I never kind of fit the profile of your typical gang member. I never used to wear low batties. I never actually used to wear tracksuits. This is the funny thing. As I've got older, I wear more tracksuits now. If you look at my wardrobe, like I have more tracksuits now than I did when I was a teenager.
You were a formal.
I was a formal guy. Yeah, I would wear jeans with a belt. Like if you saw me, you couldn't profile me as a gang member because I just, you know what I mean?
Someone said that's very smart.
You know what I'm saying? And I don't even think it was conscious, but it was just who I was. I was more comfortable in that manner. I didn't really have many run-ins with the law. I only ever had one reprimand, and that was for something stupid. So we had beef with another school, and this school used to come and invade our school. Like we had security at our gate, but the security guard, when they turned up, he would just lock himself in his box and call the police. Like he weren't on it. So these guys would be running up in our PE lessons. Like imagine doing PE, bro, and you're climbing up the rope, and then man's just kicking the door down. And you've now got to fight. Like teachers are there, girls are screaming. Like it's mental. Like so. Anyway, one of my boys, he was in design technology, and he picked up a wooden mallet because he knew that these guys were coming, right? And he got called to go and see his head of year. So he goes to me, "Oh, bro, just hold this to me." So I put it in my rucksack without a second thought. Anyway, I was moving about the school as normal, and one of my boys was in a detention. He was like the top sports guy. So the PE teacher's flipping out like, "No, we need him here now. Like, we're about to start this football game. If he's not here for starting 11, heads are gonna roll." Basically, like, so I don't care what detention he's in. You know what I mean? Like, you know them PE teachers, yeah? Them PE teachers, like, what my lessons were important. Do you know what I'm saying? So anyway, he was like, "Oh, can you go and find him?" And so I've gone up to find him. He was on the third floor in the French class, and I've gone to the teacher. I was like, "Yeah, sir's looking for him." I'm trying not to mention any names here. I was like, "Sir's looking for him," and he's like, "Oh well, he's in a detention. He's got 10 minutes left." I was like, "But the game kicks off in like 5 minutes." "Yeah, well, you know, he's obviously got detention, so he's got to do his time." Anyway, one of the other French teachers had lost their keys. They misplaced their keys, and so I'm sitting in the detention with my boy, and all of a sudden the teachers walked in with the school police officer, and they're looking for this teacher's keys. So she was like, "Oh yeah, I've lost my keys. I'm just trying to see if I've dropped them anywhere, blah, blah, blah." And so they were searching people's bags. Innocently, like a fool, I was just like, "Yeah, no way, take my bag," not knowing or remembering that I had my boy's mallet in the bag. So anyway, the officer's gone through my bag and he's looked and he goes, "What's this?" So me being a cocky teenager was like, "It's a mallet." Being a cocky teenager. And so he was like, "So what have you got this for?" And again, because of the code that I lived by, like you don't grasp people out, you don't snitch on people. So I was like, "It's mine." What? Like, you know that this school's coming down and you know we've got issues with the school, I gotta defend myself. He's like, "Yeah, but this is a dangerous weapon. We're gonna have to take you into. I remember I got arrested. Now, just talking about actions and reactions and consequences. That day when I got arrested, I got taken to the station. This was my first time going to the station, being processed and that stuff, even though, as I said, I was about a lot of things. But that day was a very pivotal day in my life and in the way how I looked at things, because while I was arrested, a guy who had an issue with me saw my younger brother and he was attacked on the way home. So my younger brother then got attacked and I wasn't there to defend him because I was, I was being processed. And I remember after the whole thing happened, because obviously I'm a minor, so I had to wait for my mum to come to the station, and they obviously explained to her, they gave me a reprimand for it. And I went home and I saw my little brother and he had like some cuts and bruises on his face, and I said to him, what happened? And he was like, oh yeah, basically so-and-so jumped me. And I was just like, is this the life that I'm living? That, because of what I'm involved with, people who are innocent, who are around me, are now being dragged into this life? And it really made me analyze what I was doing, because yeah, it was all well and good when I was around, when I could physically do something, but what happens when I'm not there? And I always realized I'm not going to be around forever, in terms of I could have traveled, I could go somewhere, but who is going to end up being collateral damage because of the choices I made? My brother didn't punch that boy in the face. My brother didn't join that gang. My brother wasn't a part of that life. But because of it, he was dragged into something that he weren't involved in. And, I commend my brother, because my brother didn't take that situation and turn nasty, because he could have, and wanted to join that life to get that sense of protection and so on. But it just made me wake up to me, basically. It was just like, you can't be doing this. Like, your younger brother, who's innocent and vulnerable, ended up being jumped, not by one person, but a group of people, because they were out looking for you, but because you was somewhere else. That would have been me. Like, let's be honest, but I probably would have handled myself. But my brother never had no one to call. So he was just there. He was literally just innocently walking home and they caught him. So, that was one of the only real times I got in trouble with police. Again, they'd come about, as you say, and just banter with you and whatever. Like, we know you're doing something, but there's nothing that could stick. Like, you couldn't see me on road and be like, yeah, we know you're up to no good. I was always very smart. I knew what was around me. I knew my surroundings. I knew about cameras. I knew about, being off the grid, So for me, I never really had too many run-ins, but that one was very vital because it led on to another event, which obviously caused me to reevaluate where I was at in my life.
Yeah, I guess we can go straight into that, to be honest. Because I think one of my next questions would have been, you got in, and there have been some horror stories about how people leave the gang life. For some people, they've signed a death row record contract, or for some of our younger listeners, they signed these new Chelsea contracts that are being handed out for 8-10 years, which is essentially the entirety of your career. So yeah, I just wanted to know, so you said that's a moment of realization, which led you to reevaluate. And then you said that also then had knock-on effects moving forward. So go into that a little bit for us.
So for me, when I kind of was alone with my thoughts and just assessing, okay, if this is the path that you're taking in life, where would it lead to? How far would you go? Now, when I was younger, growing up in South London, we were a violent gang. Other people were involved in the more drug side of things, but we weren't involved in that side. And yeah, there were guys that used to carry tools and so on and would go above and beyond, do things that you shouldn't have to do. But I was just thinking to myself, okay, in this situation, how far are you willing to go? Or when is the point where you say, do you know what, enough is enough? This ain't for me. And as I say, seeing my brother in a situation where he was physically harmed because of my actions, it really made me kind of, just have a long, hard look in the mirror. And I remember having a conversation with my older. And one thing I love about my older is that even though he was my older in the gang, he was very understanding, and he did actually look at me as a younger brother. And fortunately, as I say, for me, because the gang was the way that it was, I wasn't a part of the estate. I didn't grow up in the estate. I was one of few that were off the estate. So I was only ever really involved when I was called into stuff rather than, be my day-to-day reality. When I sat down and spoke to him, he was on the verge of kind of pulling out. He was a lot older than me. Again, I was still in secondary school. He had moved on to college. So I guess his lifestyle had changed, his perception of life had changed, and where he was at had changed. So when I spoke to him, I was just like, you know what, bro? I don't feel like this is for me. Like I don't see myself being this person because I'm not a violent and angry person. It takes a lot to get me riled up. And most of the times when I fought, it wasn't because I was angry. It was just because it was an action that I knew that I had to kind of do. But I was just like, this ain't me. And it's turning me into a person that I don't like. And now my family have been brought into it. It's now opened up this side of my life to my family because I now had to explain why my brother had been attacked by random people because he didn't have no passel with no one. So when my mum and dad's asking me and my dad's going, so, you're going to have to deal with this as his older brother, I'm like, yeah. But again, for me, it was more gang mentality rather than looking out for my younger brother. There's ways of dealing with things, which at the time, I was still trying to process. Like, I wanted to go out and ride out. Of course, you've touched my brother that same night, I'm coming for you. But was that really what my brother needed? Or did he need his older brother there to console him? Did he need his older brother there to kind of walk through what happened, why it happened, and apologize? I had to take accountability for what had happened to him. And I was like, if it happens now, it could happen again and it could be worse. So when I spoke to my older, I was just like, do you know what? As much as I love and respect you guys, like, me personally, I'm out. Like, I can't continue to live my life like this because it's now affecting the other side of my life. Whereas before it wasn't directly affecting it. Just up here, I had a battle in my mind, but now it's, okay, so my mom's going, so what, you're involved in stuff? Like, what are you guys doing? Then she started to notice times I was going out, times I was coming in. So there was things that kind of opened her eyes now. Whereas before I was code switching, I was able to, navigate through it. She's like, nah, so all this time when you've been going out, you've been running about with these guys and so on. So yeah, she then became very concerned for me. And I was like, you know what, I can't put my family through this anguish anymore. There were situations where I was hurt in certain fights. I mean, I was attacked, I was beaten down, and I was just like, how much more of this can I take? How much more of this can my body take? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there was a time where I was attacked, I was admitted to hospital, I discharged myself because I heard the boys were waiting outside the hospital, and I went outside and got beat up again. And it was just like, how much more of this can I really do? There's only so much fight that I have in me, and because I knew that wasn't my lifestyle, I had to walk away. So it wasn't, to be honest, I've always been quite fortunate. And when we go on to other stuff, I'll explain a bit further. But I've always been quite fortunate when it comes to exiting things that I shouldn't be involved with. I always feel like there's always that higher power that's always looked down on me. I've always thought that God has always had a hand in things rather than it being on my own power. Because, when you're involved in these things, the thing about gangs is gangs are, how can I put it? When you're in a gang, you know things that could be detrimental to the gang if you leak that information to somebody else. So it's very hard for a gang to let you go, even if you say you're going on the straight and narrow, because that information that you have could be to their detriment. So when you're in a gang, you're in a gang, that's it. Like, there is no, I'm leaving, because you could go to a rival gang and then give vital information that puts them in danger. So I was very fortunate I was able to walk away without there being any real repercussions. Of course, people weren't happy, but they weren't happy for their own selfish reasons, because I guess their hitman weren't going to be on call anymore, rather than looking out for my general well-being. And that's when I realized who was really family and who was really there for me and who was there for what I could do for them. So
it's really important for people to really discern who's really with them and who's with them for something. It's parallel to the prodigal son when he left home, went out into the world, and as soon as his money and his riches dried up, those people who would have thought were his family, they showed him who they really were. David, I'm not sure. What's the next chapter then? What did life look like after then? Because I'm not sure how old you were at the time when you kind of left that life behind. But then what does life then look like for you after now? You said, you know what, this isn't for me. I don't want my actions affecting those that are close to me. But then now it's what's next?
Yeah. So, you know, when I was saying that being involved in that gang life took my focus off of other things that were important, when my time wasn't consumed with running about with the gang, I then realized that I had gifts and abilities and talents that I wanted to explore. And I had time to obviously look into them, whereas before it was home life, gang life. Now it was like that side of my life has been removed and now I've got a lot more free time on my hands. So I realized I was really good at singing when I was younger. So I was a singer. Those who know me in my latter part of my life think I've been a rapper for the entirety of the time, but I actually hated rapping when I was younger. I'm not even gonna mincemeat my words. I hated it. I thought it was for degenerates. I thought that people who done it were untalented. I thought that they were very illiterate just with the way how they articulated themselves. I didn't feel like, obviously everyone has their way of expression, but I just felt like it was beneath me, to be honest. Not in a horrible way, but I just thought, I'm not really on this rap thing. So I really love singing. I was really good at singing. I used to, let me not say that. That might make me look worse still. But yeah, I used to sing. I was in a four-piece music group. Me and one of my boys and two girls. We was in a gospel group, and we used to tour churches and sing and stuff. And I started to realize that there was more to me than this person. I had more character. I realized I started to love myself and get to know who I really was, because that wasn't me. It was contrary to who I was. I didn't really know myself. All I knew of myself was this gang life, but really that wasn't me. And so when I was able to do other things, I realized that, okay, so now I'm actually living life. And I started to be surrounded again now by people who cared about me genuinely, rather than people who cared about me based on what I could do for them. And, we had several opportunities with music, which opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I used to write a lot of poetry as well. So in all of what I was doing, I was a sweet boy. I was a gallus. Like, I'm not going to mince my words. I was a sweet boy. And, so singing really helped me in my walk with females. Because like girls would just call me up randomly and say, sing this song. And I'd just sing like morning, noon or night. You could wake me up out of my sleep and I'd sing. And I was always pitch perfect. But, poetry again was a way of me expressing myself. And it's weird because I say that I have a limitation with articulating myself, but I can write music. And this is so weird. This is why I say that what I have is not a limitation, it's a superpower, right? Because in certain aspects, I can't articulate myself. But if you listen to my music, you'd be like, wow, this guy's actually, like, I can understand where he's coming from. In a 16 bar, I can take you through an entire story. Whereas I could write you 2 pages of an essay and you'd be like, this is gibberish. I lost him in the first paragraph. So, I realized that, okay, maybe I need to focus my energy into something where I can articulate myself. And, people used to say that my voice was good, it's easy for them to listen to. So what happens is I could portray a message to people and they would listen because my voice was, I don't know what the word is, but it was just easy listening, do you know what I'm saying? So I shifted my focus again from the education side and poured all my time into music. I just wanted to do music. That's all I wanted to do. So when I first started out, I wanted to be an artist. That's all I wanted. And then through poetry, a lot of my boys that I was with and my cousin, they all were MCs. And again, it was something that I was just like, oh, this MCing thing. And I think you guys need to understand where I'm coming from, right? So let's take you back as a young teenager in Southeast London. At them times, it was the grime clashes. It was underground stuff, open mics, you know what I mean? DJs, gritty underground, everyone passing the mic around, they're cussing each other's mums, and you know what I mean? It wasn't like what music is now. So maybe I have to explain that to you for you to understand why I despised it so much. It's not that I hate rap. It was just at that time what these people were talking about. I was just like, yeah, but do you know what I mean? Like, it's not that, and a lot of the beef stemmed from music, right? So we'll go to an event, these guys are doing their thing, one man picks up a mic, starts talking crud about someone else, somebody else says something else, and then it becomes something, and then we're outside and everyone's punching each other up and someone gets something stuck in them. So it was one of them situations where I just thought that this type of music is not what I want to do. It's not where I see myself. But anyway, as I was going through like that journey, I was with my boys. They had a studio in one of my boys' house. And my cousin was like, oh, what are you doing? I was writing poetry at the time. And he was like, have you ever thought of putting that poetry on a beat? Because that's literally what we do. Like, that's what rapping is. And I was just like, yeah, nah, I'm good. And, he kept trying to convince me to do it. And eventually he got me in the booth. And yeah, obviously I missed the beat several times. And it was hard for me to obviously kind of get my flow. But eventually I found it. And then I found a newfound love and passion for rap and music. And it was just so weird because it was like what I saw as something that I despised now became something that I felt like I could use as a tool to promote myself and share my message and my story. So, it's kind of crazy how things shift. But now that I had the time away from that life, I was now able to just kind of express and explore who David Johnson is and, how I can be of benefit to people through my life, through my experiences, through my story. So again, with my songs, when people were writing nonsense, I would write stories. I would tell my story. It's like, how can I put my story into this 16 bars so someone understands my journey within 16 bars rather than me just spitting nonsense. So yeah, that's kind of the nooks and crannies of how I kind of walked away from that life and that transition to just being a normal human being, because the gang life is fugazi, man. You live a fake life. You're not really operating on a level that everyone else is operating on, because the things that you're doing, the moral battles that you have, you're not doing things that normal people do. The thoughts that you're thinking are not what normal people are thinking. You can't go out normally and not look over your shoulder and wonder who's there. You can't go to places, postcode wars. You can't cross over postcodes and go, yeah, I can just go from Lewisham to Peckham, Rago. No, you can't. You're in a situation where you're constantly thinking, what am I doing? Where am I going? If you're going somewhere, where are you taking me? You're asking questions because you're like, I can't be caught slipping in the next man's end. Whereas when I walked away from that life, I didn't have none of them struggles. I didn't have them thoughts anymore. So it helped me to kind of just be free to be me and live,
So yeah, so after, I guess, how long did that go on for? That section?
So it was a good few years. I'd say probably about 2 or 3 years, where I really took my music seriously. I took life seriously. We was doing a lot of stuff, and then when I transitioned from obviously singing to rapping, I've done a lot of campaigns with people, anti-knife, anti-gun campaigns, and just being able to speak to people through my story and my journey, because I felt like I had been on the front line of a lot of things. So I experienced things that other people probably didn't experience or never would experience. And also I was able to break the fourth wall a little bit. Whereas, as I say, some people share their experiences and hide a lot of other things. I shared my experiences and brought everything to the forefront. So yeah, it was a good like 2 or 3 years. I'd say that I was like heavily, really involved in music. Um, I always found ways. If you gave me a computer and a microphone, I'd record music for you somehow. So yeah, that was kind of what I was heavily focused on for that period. But I think, like as I said, I grew up and lived in Southeast London. But once I'd finished school, my dad decided that he wanted to sell up and move out of London because London it started to become very expensive. Not compared to what it is now. It's even worse now, but it started to become very expensive. So a friend of his who he was working with kind of sold him the dream of Essex, you know. It's like, yeah, move to Essex, it's cheaper and you can still commute to London, but you know, house prices are cheaper and so on. So he bit the bait and we moved.
Completely relate. But then you were out of school by this time, right?
Yeah.
So how old would you have been then? Was this uni age, like 18, 19?
So when we moved, I was 17. And again, now because of my limitations in school, my GCSEs were really bad. My GCSEs could spell GCSE. They were horrendous. Some of them, I don't even think they got graded because I literally just wrote my name and fell asleep. So yeah, I genuinely, because I knew I wasn't going to get anything out of it, I just didn't put in any effort. So when I left school, when everyone else was looking at college prospectus, I just went and worked. I was working at a mechanics garage. So yeah, I was 17 at the time, but it was just so difficult because it was just a whole new world, like a different experience, different people, trying to understand this new place. Like I've lived somewhere since birth and then I've moved. It's the only place I've ever moved. I've lived in and around South London, but I've never moved out of South London. So yeah, it was just different, very different. The people were different. The air was different. The culture was different. Like, you know, when you say you can sense something, you smell something in it, like it was just different. Like London, there's something you smell, there's a vibe, but I just felt a bit like a really tiny fish in a giant pond. Moving to Essex, I just felt really uncomfortable. So I think for me, it was a massive turning point in my life and probably the beginning of the decline, which I'm sure we'll go into.
You mentioned decline. I wanted to ask what your support system would have been like then, because as you said, you basically left everything that you've known. Mum and dad would have had their own paths that they're trying to forge because everybody's starting afresh, essentially.
Yeah.
So what was it like? Did you have I was going to say a safety net, but at least a group of people around, maybe one or two guys you could have called to speak to, or was it really you're just out in this new world by yourself trying to figure things out?
I mean,
You're
I
welcome
had
to Brothers
people
Code,
who I
and
could
my name is
contact.
Shay Daniels.
Another
Such
thing
a
about
joy
me,
to have you
I have
here.
a really bad telephone.
Brothers Code is an initiative that God has laid in my heart to help raise the
a lot
bar
of
for
my
men.
interactions are always
By
face to
speaking
face.
about things that have to do with men.
I feel like
having
keeping in contact with
conversations about
people
things that we
via
don't talk about.
our time,
And
MSN,
you're welcome to Brothers Code.
and on the phone with 5-day pass and so on, it was just really difficult for me to keep in contact with people because I'm more of a face-to-face kind of guy. So even though I had them people, it wasn't the same. I would literally go back to London and check my boys. I wouldn't, speak to them on the phone. So I had them, but maybe not as often because, again, like my boys were in college and doing their thing, and I was one of the ones who was working. I was a bit more free. So yeah, I didn't have the support system that I needed in its entirety, but I did have somewhat of a support system.
So then going back to what you termed the decline, just touch on that for us. What would you, because from the story so far, it sounds like you've turned a corner. Sounds like you've left things behind and you're starting to uncover more about who David really is. So to hear now that there was a decline, I'm sure a lot of listeners, as well as I am, are intrigued as to what that was.
Yeah, so, when it comes to turning your life around and changing things, there's always something waiting around the corner. And this is something that I realized through my through my want of wanting to be back in my old environment, wanting to be back around friends and family, I was in a place where I was alone, and in a place where I had to like, I mean, it's difficult for people to make friends anyway. And a lot of my good friends that I've made were friends that I grew up with, and we've had a long-term relationship. But when you get to certain ages, you don't really make friends per se. You do make some friends, like, don't get me wrong, but like, you've moved from one area to another. I wasn't out walking the streets of London trying to look for a friend. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I weren't there like, oh, I wonder if this guy's cool. Like, can I be his mate? Like, so for me, even though there were people that I spoke to and acquaintances, in terms of like friends, I didn't really have many. So what happened was I just missed home a lot, and anything that could make me feel like home or remember home was what I cling to. So when I say a decline, what happened for me was moving to an area where you don't know nobody, and then meeting up with somebody from your past can either be a positive or a negative, right? This person in my past wasn't a negative person, but at this season of my life was a negative person. But because of where I was at, I wasn't able to read the signs. So somebody who I thought was a friend and somebody who I thought was like a safety net ended up being one of the biggest downturns in my entire life. So the story goes, I met up with an old friend in Basildon Town Centre. And obviously I'm shocked because, again, I still feel like Essex is the sticks. I don't know anyone even knows this place exists. So the fact I see someone else that I know in this place, I'm like, right, this is mental, okay. So because, and it's weird because even though I lived a bit of a rugged life in my teenage life, I still was shielded from a lot of stuff. So like with regards to, as I said to you, we was a more violent gang than drugs. So I wasn't exposed to drugs like that. Yeah, my boys used to smoke weed, but that was just normal. It's just like someone smoking a fag or drinking alcohol. It wasn't like I didn't see any of the ins and outs of selling drugs. I was never privy to any of that stuff. So anyway, had I been privy to that stuff, maybe it would have made sense, this person being out in the sticks just randomly like that. Because it's not somewhere where you just move to. Do you know what I'm saying? But again, when I knew him in my past life, he wasn't a troublesome. He was just someone I went to school with, isn't it? So for me, I was like, yeah, it's just my boy. Like, I finally got someone who knows me. And you made a point about leaving your past life behind. I did very much leave my old life behind me. But then now what happened was somebody from my past life who knew me was in a position where they held the power to expose who I was before, in a place where I'm trying not to be that person. So I was then left a bit vulnerable because it's like, okay, these people know me as this version of David Johnson. They don't know who that David Johnson was. They don't know I was involved in gangs. They don't know what I'd done. I've now moved here. What they see is what they get. Now he said, oh, I've got a flat up here now. I'm living up here, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, right, this is mental. Like, one of my boys from school has just moved down here. Like, I didn't even, you know what I mean? So I got a bit like gassed, and when I checked out his flat one night, when I walked into his flat, and again, this also goes down to the naivety of me as a person. When I walked into his flat, it was like the scene of, I don't know, a music video. The lights were low, people were playing Xbox, PS, there was money everywhere, there was alcohol everywhere, it was just whatever. But in my mind, I was just there because it's my boy's place. He was like, oh, we're just having a little gathering. I was like, yeah, cool, no way. So I'm just chilling, just reminiscing with my boy. Oh, okay, so what brings you down here, blah, blah, blah. So we're talking. Anyway, after that night, when I went to go and see him, at this time, obviously, I was 17, so I was on foot. I wasn't driving or anything, so I was walking. But you know, when you're in Leyden, Basildon way, there's back roads to get you home, and then there's the main road. Now, it was late, so I took the main road. Again, being from South London, I'm smart. Like, I'm not trying to go down no back roads and bump into nobody. You know what I'm saying? So I walk the main road, so at least I'm following. There's lights, there's cars, there's whatever. Anyway, so I've gone home, carried on as normal. A couple of days later, 2 cars pulled up outside my house. One was a Range Rover and one was a BMW M4. And obviously, I don't know anyone who drives these cars. So anyway, I've come out my house and someone signaled me down from the car and told me to come over. So I've gone over and he's talking to me. He's like, oh yeah, it was good, blah, blah, blah. It was just humouring him, carrying on with the conversation. Anyway, he was like, oh, so you live around here? I was like, yeah. And he goes, oh, okay. And then he took his phone out and he started showing me pictures of my siblings. So he had a picture of my sister, he had a picture of my younger brother, and he was like, oh yeah, your brother goes to this school, your sister goes to this college. I was just like, okay, so where is this going? So eventually, long and short of it, he was like, oh, well, you know, we know that you're so-and-so's boy, and, you know, he says that you're on job, and we want you to start, like, moving some stuff for us. And I was just like, this is interesting. My initial thoughts, again, coming from South London, that, like, the more you allow the situation, the worse it gets, right? So if I had said anything to family, parents, they would have gone to the police, it would have got sticky. Because that's just their initial thought, but they don't think about. So I was just like, you know what, I'm going to do what I have to do to protect my family. So that's what I've done. I very quickly kind of drifted away from home and ended up living in a trap house and was moving food for them. And, you know, I won't go too much into it because some people might read the wrong things into it. It's not glorification. I hated every minute of it. Again, I was still very heavily involved in church. One of my conditions was that on a Sunday morning between this time and this time, the phone line was off because I was in church. And as soon as I'm finished, I'll be back. But if it was a minute later than I said I was going to be back, they'd be on my case. And, you know, it was horrible. Imagine living in someone's house who's dependent on drugs, and the drugs they're dependent on are the drugs you're selling. And, you know, if you don't give them their fix, you have to sleep in that house and hope that you wake up the next morning. It was horrible, very horrible. Again, as somebody who like lived at home with family my whole life, was always around family, friends or whatever, I had to isolate myself from people because nobody could know what I was up to because, again, that moral compass was like, you shouldn't be doing this, but I knew why I was doing it. And, you know, just to say this, just because you personally feel like something is the right thing to do, it doesn't always mean that it's the right thing to do. There's always other options, but at the time I took what I thought was the best option to protect my family. Again, you never know people's hearts and intentions. I don't know whether they would or wouldn't have troubled my family. I couldn't answer that. But at the same time, I was just like, if I have to do this to protect my family, I'll do it. It doesn't cost me anything to protect them. But yeah, I was out and about on roads for, I'd say, 6 months. Different trap houses. One thing about me though, I'm a very smart person in regards to, I sense trouble and I sense danger. And I remember there was this one time I just had this funny feeling that something was going to happen. So we're sitting in this trap house, me and my boy, and I was like, we need to leave. And he was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? It's like, I was just like, we just need to go. I just don't know why, but we just can't stay here. Anyway, we left and we were standing not far from the flat, just chilling. And probably about an hour later, the police came and turned the place over. And imagine that we would have been sitting in there with all the drugs, you know. So even, and it's weird because I know what I'm going to say now is going to be very conflicting for some people. But even when you put yourself in situations God is always still in control. God is always, protecting you and looking out for you, even when you put yourself in a sticky situation, right? And I'm not saying that God protected me from being arrested, but what I'm saying is He protected me from danger, even in the midst of adversity. And that's one thing that I always vocalize to people, is that even when you're wrong, and even when you're in a place where you shouldn't be, God's always there to say, do you know what? I know that you've taken the wrong turn in life, but I haven't left you and I've not forsaken you. And I feel like during that period in my life, so many things happened, but I was so numb to everything because I couldn't, again, be who I wanted to be. I couldn't be myself. I had to be this version of David Johnson, who is not who people knew and loved. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to church on a Sunday and I'm shotting drugs Sunday evening when I come back from church. It was just mad. But then I had to keep up appearances. I couldn't stop going to church. And I couldn't walk away from this. So it was a catch-22. But, it's mental.
When you had that premonition, I guess, and you were standing outside of the flat with your friend, when you did see the police pull up, what were your immediate thoughts?
My immediate thoughts was that we dodged a bullet. I just thought to myself, like, raw. Because, you hear that inner voice, and sometimes you listen and sometimes you don't. I just felt uncomfortable. I just couldn't stay in there. And, there's things that happened after that point that maybe might have been the reason why I was saved from arrest then. But I feel like even in the midst of what I was doing, that there was a greater purpose and a greater plan. So even though we took the wrong turn, there was still people along your journey before you reach your destination that you needed to encounter. And I wouldn't have encountered if I wasn't doing what I was doing. So, as much as I was like, oh, thank God, this time I didn't get arrested, it was always like every time something of that nature happened, you knew you was one step closer to being arrested.